Good afternoon, I'm Karen Kozier-Phillips. C News is live at noon. Well, millions of Americans have already gone to the polls this morning to exercise their democratic right to choose the President of the United States. Voting booths across the U.S. opened at 6 a.m. across the vast country of some 260 million people. So far, over 41 million Americans have voted in a number of states and abroad, with some 100 million expected to turn out for today's ballot. We now take you live to CNN to get an idea on how things are shaping up.
These are pictures from Raleigh, where many are waiting to make their voices heard. Isn't that crazy? CNN's Victor Blackwell is there. Hi, Victor.
Hi, Carol. Good morning. We're here in North Raleigh. This is Bedford, this community where these voters are lined up. Let's take a look at the line here because there's been a significant and constant line here. We saw what we would expect on an election day, that rush of voters coming in who vote typically before they go to work, but this line has stayed pretty long. Let's take a look at the other end here and show you how far it goes back. Now, Wake County is where we are, and this is a county that votes every election cycle. In 2012, the national average was, or the voter turnout, I should say, was 58%. Here in North Carolina, it was 68%. But in Wake County, this battleground of 2016, 75% voter turnout. And we have seen this line here in the community of Bedford all morning long, 3.5 hours into voting. Now, let me take you next door because we have had some reports from the Durham County Board of Elections and got some information from the North Carolina State Board of Elections that there have been some problems with the polling check-in system there, a computerized system in at least 5 locations. There have been some problems with the computers that they use to check people in. So out of an abundance of caution, they've moved to polling books. Now, this will not affect tabulation, we're told. However, it will cause some of those lines to get a little longer. But again, they tell us that this should not affect the tabulation of the votes. It's a Democratic county. Democrats there outnumber Republicans 5-1 with a substantial number of unaffiliated voters. That's next door in Durham County. We'll keep an eye on that. Carol?
Okay, so Victor, the real problem might come when people get off work and go out to vote, and the lines may be long, and people might not get up to the polling station by the time the polls close. But just to be clear, if you are in line before those polls close, you still get to vote, right?
That is right. The polls close here at 7:30. If you're in line, you get to stay in line and get into to vote. And that may be a bigger problem next door in Durham County, where they're having to check people in according to those books and can't check them in according to their computerized system as planned. Carol.
It's going to be a long night. Victor Blackwell live from Raleigh, North Carolina. Another key battleground state is Florida, of course, and it's not just the presidential race that's sending voters to the polls there. Let's head to Florida now, to Miami-Dade County and Boris Sanchez. Hi, Boris.
Hey, good morning, Carol. Yeah, the big story out of Florida is the turnout. More than 6.5 million Floridians have already cast their ballots in this election. To give you some perspective, that's more people than voted in the entire 2000 election. It's nearly 50% of all registered voters here in the state of Florida. And we are expecting big turnout today on Election Day. So far, things have been pretty slow. We've had a steady stream of turnout at this voting location behind me in Hialeah in Miami-Dade County. Right now, the way things are trending, it is a county that is leaning, at least in early voting, toward Democrats. They have about 112,000 vote advantage here across the state. It's 90,000.
Now tonight at 10 p.m. GMT, which is 6 p.m. local time, both candidates will gather at their respective Democratic and Republican camps in New York City to await the results of Voting Day 2016. And we will have more as the afternoon progresses. Back at home now, and we start with some missing persons reports. A Tobago woman has gone missing, and relatives are asking for the public's help to find her. Keesey Alexis reportedly went missing on Saturday, 5th November 2016. Her cousin made a post on her Facebook page asking people to share her picture so they will be able to find her. Anyone with information can call the Scarborough Police Station. And a search is also on for 23-year-old Keesey Alexis. She is an employee of the Express newspaper. Alexis was reported missing on Monday. She lives in Malabar, Arima. C News was told Alexis was last seen leaving Express House in Port of Spain at 3 p.m. on Monday. and was heading to class at UE St. Augustine. But her family is not sure she made it there, as she did not come home last night. Her family says she normally informs them if she is arriving home late. Alexis was robbed in the churchyard at the Arima Open Bible Church on Sunday, and bandits reportedly took away her cell phone. You're watching the CNews Live report at noon. Remember, you can keep up to date with all the latest news on our website at ctvtt.com, or you can check out our Facebook and Twitter pages at CNews Live. To other news now, the new energy minister is calling on energy operators to accept responsibility for oil spills in the Gulf of Paria. This after the recent oil spill off the coast of Labrie. Speaking at the AmCham Health, Safety and Security Environment Conference, which began at the Hyatt today, Franklin Cann said as a geologist himself, there are no natural oil spills undersea in the Gulf.
Just hiding behind the goalposts all the time when this incident of oil pollution occurs is not acceptable. We have to take responsibility because it will affect the lives of the common man. And while we are captains of industries, it's something we cannot tolerate.
Mr. Khan also said oil spills in the Gulf have been on the rise in the past few years.
Over the period 2011 to 2015, oil pollution to land and marine areas have sharply increased from a low of 843 barrels in 2011 to a staggering high of 18,960 barrels in 2014. You all remember the Labrie oil spill. You all remember a sequence of oil spills that has been occurring in the Gulf of Paria. It has affected fishermen. And I viewed with much disgust when companies seeing oil in the sea, seeing it affecting fishermen, seeing it killing fish, seeing oil in the mangrove and the crab laced in petroleum, and saying, I'm not sure where it's coming from. It could only come from one place. It could only be two sources. Is it crude oil, or is it fuel oil or bunker fuel or something like that? That is a very easy test to do. So you eliminate bunker fuel. It has to be crude. There are no natural, I'm a geologist, there are no natural oil seeps in the Gulf of Paria.
Turning to politics now, the opposition leader is claiming the HDC has paid over $13 million to Bolt Trinidad Limited, the company owned by the wife of the Minister of Finance. On Sunday, it was reported $7.5 million was paid to Suzanne Williams Imbert, prompting the Housing Development Corporation to issue a clarification that said it had paid just over $100,000 to the consultancy firm. But at a UNC public meeting in Chaguanas on Monday night, Mrs. Prasad Bisasa claimed to have seen the checks paid, alleging that while the initial sum for the work was $5 million, over twice that amount was paid.
According to the opposition leader, the contract was awarded for work to be done for 18 months ending July 30th, 2007.
At that time, the rate paid to contractors for project management services was generally 2% to 3%. Do you know the contract awarded to Bolt without tender? It was 10.8%. Do you know how much money Bolt was paid under this contract? Bolt was paid more than $13 million.
Mrs. Prasad Bisasa explained that work did not end in 2007 as was stated in the contract, but went on for 7 more years, thereby increasing the amount which has to be paid to the contractor. She said she has in her possession an email dated April 12, 2016, sent by Suzanne Williams Imbert to the Housing Development Corporation requesting the payment.
One Susan Williams Imbert writes to Mr. Brennan Lyons of HEC and makes inquiries about the payments. 2 days later, Managing Director Mr. Lyons replies and tells Mrs. Imbert, the delay in payment is regretted. I will look into making a payment to you no later than next week, Tuesday. How many contractors in this country have not been paid, knocking on the doors for the past 14 months? How many have had to shut their businesses to lay off workers? But here it is, email sent 20 April, Mr. Lyons, managing director, says, don't worry, I'll make sure, I'm sorry for the delay, by next Tuesday.
Initial reports stated no public tendering process had been held to award the contract.
So the then chairman of the HEC is reported to say there was no real selection process when both were selected. And in the advertisement today, paid for by your dollars, they're saying that they had a competitive bidding process. You hear live? You hear live? And they want to tell us about waste, about mismanagement, and about corruption. But there is more. There is more.
Mrs. Prasad-Bisasa wants the Minister of Finance to say why other contractors aren't yet paid for work done. Rishi Harinanan, CNews.
Now here's a look at the weather.
Look for cloudiness and dampness across both islands, with puddles forming quickly, spray seen on Corvus, and downpipes flowing freely as well. Thunderclouds and downpours, especially over the northern range and into parts of Tobago. Look for a humid 32 degrees Celsius today. For those heading offshore, look for easterly winds of 10 to 15 knots, moderate chop of 1.5 meters through the Caribbean and the Atlantic, and easterly swells of 8 seconds. Tide is low at 5 p.m., then high at 11 p.m. That is the latest weather, and I am Meteorologist Dean Wallace.
Political analyst Dr. Bishnu Raghunath says he does not expect the campaigns leading up to the local government election to focus on the community issues facing the country, and that's very disappointing. As he spoke with CNews this morning, he said there are going to be two strategies leading up to the November 28th election. The People's National Movement will have a campaign saying it has only been in government for 14 months, the country does not have enough money to do what they want, and has promised local government reform, while all the opposition parties, more so the United National Congress, will focus their campaign on bashing the PNM, calling on citizens to send a message about their disenchantment with the government.
We do Trinidad and Tobago's politics is really about party politics. It's not about local politics. It's not about what is best for your community or your electoral district or who's the best candidate to represent your electoral district. But it is really about party politics, and that is the sad part of our politics at this point in time.
Dr. Raghunath spoke on the issue of a third or a fourth party in several electoral districts. And while he does not expect them to win, he thinks they will act as spoilers.
I expect will be spoiler candidates. Some of them may be going with a track record. Take, for instance, the ILP candidate, I think, for Monroe Road, Carney Savannah. That candidate, I think, won his seat the last time around. And whether he's going to go back and be able to win back the seat this time around, we'll really have to wait and see. But if he's going on a track record and say that, here, I've worked, I've served my community, I've served my electoral district, would you vote back for me? That could very well mean that he could win a seat.
Now, according to Dr. Raghunath, there is a third factor, and that is in the selection of an alderman. He noted every vote will count, especially in those seats with more than two parties. He also said he expects the voter turnout to be lower than previous years. THA Chief Secretary Orville London says local air carrier Caribbean Airlines must give Trinidad and Tobago's airbridge priority. Speaking at the 10th Annual Business Outlook Conference currently happening at Magdalena Resort, Tobago, Mr. London said CAL isn't as reliable as it should be when it comes to providing its service to Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. London said it's all well and good that CAL is servicing other Caribbean and international destinations, but he said its service to Tobago isn't up to standard, and that must change as a means of helping to boost the island's tourism product. Over the weekend, hundreds of CAL passengers traveling between Trinidad and Tobago were left stranded after several of CAL's flights were cancelled. WASA customers in parts of central and south Trinidad are being told of the temporary shutdown of the Point Lisas desalination plant from today to the 11th of November in order to facilitate planned maintenance works. In a statement, WASA says the Desalcott-owned and operated desalination plant provides 40 million gallons daily to WASA, which is used to supply the Point Lisas industrial estate, as well as augment the supply to areas in central and south Trinidad. Now, in order to mitigate the effects of the shortfall in the supply, the authority has implemented the following. redistribution of supply from the Caroni and Navat water treatment plants, implementation of temporary supply schedules, ensure capacity storage at critical service reservoirs, increased water trucking capacity, special emphasis on arrangements to supply schools, health institutions, homes for the aged, and other special needs organizations, and accelerate response to leak repair. Well, that brings us to the end of the CNews Report at noon. Conversations with CNews comes up next with Richie Harinan, so stay tuned for that. I'm Karen Koze-Phillip. Do have a great afternoon.